The throne room fell silent the moment Alpha King Kaelin Vorith crossed the threshold. Seraphine kept her eyes fixed on the marble floor, her hands steady on the silver tray she carried despite the tremor threatening to betray her. 3 years of serving in the Obsidian Court had taught her one immutable truth: never draw attention, never speak, never exist as anything more than a shadow moving between pillars of power. But she could feel him. His presence swept through the hall like a winter storm descending from the northern peaks, sharp and electric and impossible to ignore. The visiting Alpha King from the Vorith territories had arrived 2 days early, and the court was scrambling. "My queen." His voice was deep, carrying the weight of mountains. "I trust I haven't inconvenienced you with my early arrival." Queen Lysara's laugh tinkled like glass being crushed. "Nonsense, King Kaelin. Thornhaven welcomes you, though I confess, we weren't expecting such eagerness." Seraphine moved along the edge of the room, delivering goblets of honeyed wine to the gathered nobles. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold stone. The queen preferred her servants silent in every way. Soundless steps, voiceless obedience, invisible presence. "The treaty negotiations are important," King Kaelin replied. "I saw no reason to delay." "Important indeed." Lysara's voice took on the honeyed edge that made Seraphine's blood run cold. "Though I wonder if there are other reasons the great Alpha King of the North would travel so far from his frozen kingdom." Seraphine had nearly completed her circuit when her sleeve caught on a noble's chair. She stumbled, and though she caught herself before spilling a single drop, the movement drew eyes, including his. King Kaelin's gaze found her across the crowded throne room, and Seraphine felt the impact like a physical blow. His eyes were the color of storm clouds over winter seas, gray shot through with silver that seemed to glow in the torchlight. For one terrible, eternal moment, he stared at her as if he'd been struck by lightning. She dropped her gaze immediately, heart hammering against her ribs. "Seraphine." Queen Lysara's voice cut through the murmur of conversation like a blade. "Come here." Every instinct screamed at her to run, but running meant death. Disobedience meant worse than death. Seraphine set down her tray and walked toward the raised dais where the queen sat enthroned in obsidian and silver. She felt the king's eyes tracking her every step. "Kneel," Lysara commanded. Seraphine knelt on the hard stone, her thin servant's dress offering no protection from the cold. "This is Seraphine," the queen announced to the assembled court, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "My personal attendant. She doesn't speak. A condition I find quite convenient. Isn't that right, pet?" Seraphine nodded once, keeping her face blank. "How unfortunate," King Kaelin said, and something in his voice made Seraphine's skin prickle. "Was she born mute? Does it matter?" Lysara waved a dismissive hand. "She serves her purpose. Now, shall we discuss the terms of our alliance?" But the king hadn't stopped looking at Seraphine. She could feel his attention like heat against her skin, burning through the careful armor of invisibility she'd built over years of survival. "Your servant seems unwell," he observed. "She's trembling." Lysara's eyes narrowed dangerously. "She's fine. Seraphine, show the king you're fine." Seraphine raised her head, meaning to offer the king a reassuring nod, and her sleeve slipped. The movement revealed only a glimpse of skin, a flash of her forearm before she yanked the fabric back into place. But it was enough. The marks were impossible to miss. Raised scars in intricate patterns, silver white against her pale skin, climbing from her wrist toward her elbow like frozen lightning. Burns, the kind that only came from one source: wolfsbane-treated silver. King Kaelin went absolutely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "What?" he said, his voice dropping to a register that made several nobles step backward. "Is that?" Queen Lysara's expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation, then smooth composure. An old injury. She was clumsy with a silver serving piece before she learned proper. "Those are torture marks." The words fell like stones into water. "I've seen their like on prisoners of war, on enemies tortured for information." His gray eyes lifted to meet the queen's amber gaze. "Not on servants." The throne room had gone deathly quiet. Seraphine couldn't breathe. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," Lysara said, but her smile had frozen at the edges. King Kaelin descended from the dais with deliberate steps. The crowd parted before him like waves before a ship's prow. He stopped directly in front of Seraphine, close enough that she could smell pine and winter wind and something wild beneath. "Look at me," he commanded softly. She shouldn't. The queen would punish her for it later, would make her scream in ways that produced no sound. But something in his voice made refusal impossible. Seraphine raised her eyes. The king's face was carved from granite, all sharp angles and controlled fury. But when their eyes met, something else flickered there. Recognition, wonder, and a fierce protective rage that made absolutely no sense. "What's your name?" he asked, gentle as snowfall. She couldn't answer. Even if she'd been permitted to speak, the words had been stolen from her long ago. But her lips formed the shape anyway. "Seraphine. Seraphine," he repeated, and the way he said it felt like a claiming, like he was etching her name into his very soul. Behind them, Queen Lysara rose from her throne. "King Kaelin, I must insist we return to matters of state. My servant's old injuries are hardly—" "Show me your arms." His voice remained soft, but it was a command nonetheless. Both of them. Seraphine's hands shook as she reached for her sleeves. This would destroy what little safety she'd carved out for herself. The queen would never forgive this exposure, but she couldn't refuse him. Somehow, inexplicably, she knew she would never be able to refuse him anything. She pushed back both sleeves, revealing the full extent of the damage. The marks covered her from wrist to shoulder. Burns, welts, and scars layered over years of cruelty. Some were old and faded to silver. Others were fresh, still angry and red beneath barely healed skin. The patterns were deliberate, artistic in their brutality, like someone had taken great care in crafting her pain. A low sound escaped King Kaelin's throat. Not quite human. The growl of a wolf scenting blood. "Who did this to you?" His voice had dropped to something dangerous, something that made the torches flicker and several courtiers flee toward the doors. Seraphine couldn't speak, but her eyes betrayed her, darting involuntarily toward the throne, toward the queen. The silence that followed was absolute. Then King Kaelin turned, and Seraphine saw death in his eyes. "This woman," he said, each word falling like a death sentence, "is coming with me." 3 years earlier, the day Seraphine lost her voice began with rain. She remembered the way droplets hammered against the cottage windows, the scent of wet earth from her mother's herb garden, the distant thunder that seemed like a warning she was too young to understand. She had been 16. Their small village existed on borrowed time. The Obsidian Court's territory had been expanding for years. But her mother, Ilara, had always believed they would be spared. "We're just healers," Ilara had insisted. "What use are healers to wolves?" She had been wrong. The queen's soldiers came not for healing abilities, but for something else entirely. "There's something different about your daughter," they'd said. Our seers detected an unusual resonance. Her mother had fought, had revealed her own power, golden light blazing from her palms as she attacked soldiers who could shift into creatures of nightmare. They'd killed her for it, and they'd taken Seraphine to the queen who collected broken things. "You have a gift," Queen Lysara had purred, circling her like a predator. Raw, untrained. "But there, do you know what you are?" Seraphine had shaken her head. "You're an empath. Someone born with the ability to absorb the emotions of others. Pain, fear, rage, despair. You take them into yourself." The queen's amber eyes glittered. "Such a useful gift. I have so much pain I need to get rid of." The first time had been the worst. The queen's silver-tipped claws raking across her arms while centuries of jealousy, bitter loneliness, and corrosive hatred flooded through the wounds into Seraphine's soul. The second ritual stole her voice, a curse ensuring that no matter how desperately she wanted to speak, to scream, no sound would ever pass her lips. That had been 3 years ago. Now Seraphine moved through the obsidian court like a ghost. She'd learned to survive in the spaces between moments. There was Brennan, the cook who saved scraps for her. There was the small garden where she grew herbs, the scent of rosemary connecting her to a mother she could no longer mourn aloud. And there was Mira. Mira was 14, daughter of a servant who'd died 2 winters past. She'd attached herself to Seraphine like a shadow. "You're thinking too loud," Mira whispered, appearing at her elbow. "It's about him, isn't it? The Northern King?" Seraphine's steps faltered. "Everyone's talking about what happened, how he looked at you, how he demanded to take you." Mira grabbed her arm. "Do you know what this means?" "Nothing," Seraphine signed. "The queen won't let me go." "But what if she has to? The Northern Territories are powerful." "Then she'll kill me before letting me leave." A bell rang. The queen's summons. Seraphine's blood turned to ice. "Don't go," Mira begged. But ignoring a summons was unthinkable. The queen's private chambers occupied the highest tower. When Seraphine pushed open the door, Lysara was waiting. "Close it behind you." "You embarrassed me today." Lysara's voice was pleasant. That was when she was most dangerous. In front of the entire court, in front of him. "I'm sorry," Seraphine signed desperately. "He wants you." Lysara's hand shot out, gripping her jaw. "I saw how he looked at you, like you were precious, like you mattered." Her grip tightened. "Do you know how long I've waited for someone to look at me like that?" Seraphine couldn't breathe. "But don't worry, pet. I've decided to give King Kalen exactly what he wants. You'll be part of the treaty negotiations." Lysara's lips curved. "Once I'm finished with you." She reached for the silver-tipped implements on her dressing table. "We need to remind you who you belong to." The first burn stole Seraphine's breath. By the third, she had collapsed, convulsing with pain she couldn't voice. "Someone help me," she thought as the darkness crept in. "Please." And somewhere in the castle below, a wolf began to howl. Consciousness returned in fragments. The scent of something herbal and soothing, warmth against her back that might have been a fire. Voices speaking in low, urgent tones, one female and unfamiliar, one male and impossibly deep. "Shouldn't have moved her. The burns haven't finished healing, and if the queen discovers, the queen can go straight to hell." Seraphine's eyes flew open. She was lying on a narrow bed in a room she didn't recognize. Stone walls, but warmer than the servants' quarters. Tapestries depicting wolves running beneath twin moons. A fire crackling in a hearth carved with northern runes. And King Kalen Voreth standing at the window, his massive frame silhouetted against the moonlight, tension radiating from every line of his body. "She's awake," the woman said, middle-aged, with silver-streaked hair and the bearing of a healer. "My lord, perhaps you should—" Leave us. But now. The healer departed with a worried glance over her shoulder, and then Seraphine was alone with the man who had somehow, impossibly, stolen her from the queen's chambers. He turned to face her, and even across the room, his presence was overwhelming. This close, without the distraction of the court, she could see things she'd missed before. The fine lines around his eyes that spoke of burdens carried. The silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. The careful way he held himself, as if restraining something wild. Can you sit up? His voice was gentler than she'd expected. Seraphine tried. Pain lanced through her arms and across her back, drawing a soundless gasp from her lips. But she managed it, pushing herself upright against the pillows. King Kalen approached slowly, his movements deliberate, unthreatening. He settled into a chair beside the bed, and even seated, he seemed to fill the room. I know you can't speak, he said quietly, but I need to understand what happened, what she's been doing to you. Seraphine's hands trembled as she reached for her sleeves, meaning to show him again what he'd already seen. But he caught her wrists, gently, so gently, and stopped her. Don't. His jaw tightened. I've seen enough. My healer cataloged your injuries while you were unconscious. 3 years worth of torture, she said. Systematic. Deliberate. His gray eyes found hers. Why? How could she explain? She had no voice, and even if she did, would the words exist to describe what the queen had made her into? A vessel for someone else's darkness, a canvas for cruelty, a thing to be used and discarded. She made a helpless gesture, pressing her hand to her chest, then extending it outward. She takes. I receive. The king's brow furrowed. You're an empath. Surprise flickered through her. Most people didn't even know her kind existed. I've met one before, he said, answering her unspoken question. Years ago, in the Eastern Territories, a man who could absorb pain and transform it. He saved my father's life after a battle wound that should have been fatal. Kalen's expression darkened. Is that what she uses you for? To take her emotional poison into yourself? Seraphine nodded slowly. Something dangerous moved behind his eyes. And the marks? The silver burns? She hesitated, then touched her arm where the wound still throbbed beneath fresh bandages. Pointed to her heart. Connection, she tried to convey. The pain opens a channel. Understanding dawned on the king's face, followed immediately by fury so intense it seemed to make the air itself vibrate. She tortures you to create a pathway for transferring her emotions, uses your gift against you. He rose abruptly, pacing to the window and back. I'm going to kill her. The words were spoken with absolute certainty, not as a threat, but as a promise. Seraphine's hands flew up in alarm. No, you can't. The Alliance. Damn the Alliance. He stopped before her, and the moonlight caught the silver in his eyes, making them glow almost gold. Do you have any idea what you are? She stared at him in confusion. Not just an empath. Not just a servant. He crouched beside the bed, bringing his face level with hers. This close, she could count the flecks of silver in his irises, could see the fine tremor in his hands as he fought to control himself. The moment you walked into that throne room, I knew. My wolf knew. We've been searching for you since I became Alpha. Searching? Her hands shook as she formed the word. Every Alpha has a fated mate, one person in all the world whose soul calls to theirs. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. You're mine, Seraphine. You've always been mine. The world tilted. This couldn't be real. Fated mates were legends, stories told to children. And even if they existed, How could someone like her, broken, voiceless, owned, be destined for someone like him? "You're wrong," she signed frantically. "I'm no one. I'm nothing. You are everything." He reached out, slowly enough that she could pull away, and cupped her face in his palm. His skin was warm, so warm, and where he touched her, something sparked. A connection that had nothing to do with her empath abilities, and everything to do with the wolf spirit she could suddenly sense prowling beneath his skin. I've spent 15 years feeling incomplete, searching every territory, attending every gathering, hoping to find the one who would make my soul whole. His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating tenderness. "And you've been here, suffering, alone." Tears she hadn't permitted herself in years began to fall. "You should leave me here." Her hands moved in jerky, desperate patterns. "The Queen will never let me go. She'll destroy the Alliance, start a war." "Then let her start one." His gray eyes blazed. "I will burn this entire kingdom to ash before I leave you in her hands for one more night." The door burst open. Queen Lysara stood in the threshold, her amber eyes wild with fury, her claws extended and dripping with something dark. Behind her, at least a dozen guards filled the corridor. "How touching," she hissed. "The great Alpha King, courting my broken servant." Her gaze fixed on Seraphine with murderous intent. "I wondered where you'd crawled off to, pet. I wasn't finished with you." King Kalen rose, placing himself between Seraphine and the Queen. The growl that rumbled from his chest was barely human. "You will not touch her again. She belongs to me." Lysara's voice cracked like a whip. 3 years I've invested in breaking her, training her, making her useful. You don't get to waltz into my court and steal my property." "She's not property." Kalen's hands had begun to transform, bones shifting beneath skin, fingers elongating into claws that matched Lysara's own. "She's my mate." The silence that followed was absolute. Then the Queen began to laugh. A horrible sound, high and brittle and edged with madness. "Your mate? That pathetic creature?" Lysara's face twisted with spite. "You want to know a secret, King Kalen? The reason she can't speak isn't because she was born mute. I cursed her. I stole her voice so she could never tell anyone what I do to her, what I make her absorb, what I—" She never finished. Kalen moved faster than Seraphine's eyes could track. One moment standing at the bedside, the next pressing the Queen against the wall with his clawed hand wrapped around her throat. "Break it," he snarled. "Break the curse. Now." "And if I refuse?" Lysara choked out, still smiling. "Will you kill me in my own castle? Start the war you claim not to want?" "I'll do worse than kill you." His voice had dropped to something barely recognizable. "I'll challenge you for your throne. And when I win, because I will win, I'll strip you of everything. Your crown, your court, your power. You'll spend the rest of your very long life as the lowest servant in my household, scrubbing floors and emptying chamber pots." Fear flickered in Lysara's eyes for the first time. "You wouldn't dare. The other alphas will do nothing. You've made enemies of every territory with your cruelty and your scheming." Kalen leaned closer. "So what will it be, Lysara? Your pride or your crown?" For a long, terrible moment, the outcome hung in the balance. Then the Queen's lips curled back from her teeth in a snarl of pure hatred. "Fine." She spat the word like poison. "Take her. Take the worthless little empath and see if she makes you happy." Her amber eyes found Seraphine over Kalen's shoulder, burning with malevolent promise. "But know this, pet. What I placed on you cannot be easily undone. The curse is tied to your deepest wound, and I don't think even your precious king can heal that." She muttered something in the old tongue, words that made the air shimmer and Seraphine's throat burn. Then Lysara smiled. There, I've lifted what I can. Whether she ever speaks again is out of my hands. She pushed against Kaelin's grip. Now release me, before I decide a war is worth it after all. Kaelin released her with obvious reluctance, stepping back, but keeping himself between the queen and the bed where Seraphine sat frozen. We leave at dawn, he said flatly. And if I ever see you near her again, no power in this world will stop me from ending you. Lysara straightened her gown with trembling hands, her composure cracking at the edges. Get out of my sight, both of you. As the guards parted to let them pass, as Kaelin lifted Seraphine into his arms with heart-wrenching gentleness, she caught one last glimpse of the queen's face, and the hatred burning there promised this was far from over. The journey north should have taken 3 days. They made it in 2, King Kaelin pushing his party relentlessly through mountain passes and ancient forests. Seraphine spent most of the journey tucked into a wagon lined with furs, watching the landscape change from dark pines to something wilder and more beautiful than anything she'd ever seen. Snow-capped peaks, rivers of crystalline blue threading through valleys carpeted in wild flowers, wolves howling greeting as the king's caravan passed. And always, Kaelin checking on her. He would appear at the wagon's entrance every few hours, gray eyes searching her face. He never touched her without permission, never pushed for more than she could give. But the tether between them grew stronger with every passing mile, until Seraphine could feel him even when he rode at the front of the column. Can I trust this? She wondered. Can I trust him? Mira's words echoed in her memory. What if she has to let you go? But Lysara never had to do anything. That was what Seraphine had learned during her captivity. The queen took what she wanted and destroyed what she couldn't have. And the look in her eyes when Kaelin had carried Seraphine from that room, that look had promised retribution. Vorth Keep rose from the mountainside like it had grown there, all gray stone and ancient timber. The gates opened before they reached them, and hundreds of people poured out to greet their returning king. The welcome was overwhelming. Warriors bowed their heads, servants pressed forward with offerings, children chased the wagon wheels. Through it all, Seraphine caught whispered fragments. Is it true? He found his mate? What happened to her arms? She wanted to disappear. Wanted to become the shadow she'd learned to be in the obsidian court, unseen and forgotten. But Kaelin's hand found hers as he helped her from the wagon, and he didn't let go as he led her through the crowded courtyard. My people, he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly over the noise. I have returned with someone precious. Her name is Seraphine, and she is my fated mate. A roar went up from the crowd. Joyous, welcoming, so unlike anything Seraphine had experienced that she nearly collapsed. Kaelin caught her, steadied her, and bent his head to murmur in her ear. Breathe, they're happy. This is what happiness looks like. She had forgotten. The next hours passed in a blur. She was given chambers adjoining Kaelin's own. A healer named Fenella examined her wounds. A seamstress measured her for new clothes. A young woman named Bridget was assigned as her attendant, chattering enough for both of them as she helped Seraphine into a warm bath. The king has never brought anyone home before, Bridget confided, scrubbing Seraphine's hair with something that smelled of lavender. 23 years he's been alpha, and not once has he shown interest in taking a mate. People were starting to whisper that perhaps he couldn't, that the goddess hadn't blessed him. She leaned closer. But I always knew he was just waiting for the right one. The right one. Could that really be her? Broken, voiceless, carrying years of another woman's poison in her soul? That Night. Seraphine dreamed of the queen. Lysara stood in a chamber of mirrors, each reflection showing a different version of herself. Beautiful, terrible, ancient, and young. Her amber eyes found Seraphine across the impossible distance. "Did you think you could escape me?" The queen's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "Did you think I would let you go so easily?" Seraphine tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Tried to scream, but no sound emerged. "The curse isn't truly broken, pet. I only lifted the surface. The roots remain, tangled with your deepest wounds." Lysara smiled, and her teeth were far too sharp. "You'll never truly speak again until you heal what I've damaged. And some damage can never be healed." She reached out with silver claws. Seraphine woke gasping, tangled in unfamiliar sheets, her throat burning with the memory of stolen screams. A knock at the door made her flinch violently. "Seraphine?" Kaylin's voice, rough with sleep. "I felt your distress through the bond. May I come in?" She fumbled with the bedside candle, managed to light it with shaking hands, then crossed to unlock the door. He stood in the corridor wearing only loose sleeping trousers, his chest bare, his dark hair disheveled. In the flickering candlelight, the concern on his face was devastating. "Nightmare?" he asked quietly. She nodded, stepping back to let him enter. He moved past her carefully, maintaining distance, and settled into a chair by the cold fireplace. "Do you want to tell me about it?" Seraphine hesitated. Then, slowly, she raised her hands and began to sign. Kaylin watched intently, brow furrowed. "I don't know that language." Of course he didn't. The signs were something she'd developed with Mira, personal and private. Frustration welled up in her chest. She had so much to say. About the dream, about her fears, about the Queen's final threat. And no way to communicate any of it. "Wait." Kaylin rose and crossed to a writing desk in the corner. He returned with paper and a charcoal pencil. "Can you write?" She stared at him. In all her time in captivity, no one had ever thought to ask. Servants weren't supposed to be literate. Servants weren't supposed to have thoughts worth recording. Seraphine took the pencil in trembling fingers and began to write. "The Queen came to me in my dreams. She said the curse isn't truly broken, that I'll never speak again until I heal what she damaged." Kaylin read the words, his expression darkening with every line. "She said some damage can never be healed," Seraphine added. "She's wrong." His voice was absolute. "There is no wound so deep it cannot be mended, no curse so strong it cannot be broken." "You don't know what she did to me?" Seraphine's hand shook as she wrote. "What she made me carry. 3 years of her hatred, her jealousy, her spite. It's all still inside me, poisoning me." Kaylin was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand, the one not holding the pencil, and pressed it to his chest. Beneath her palm, his heart beat steady and strong. "Then let me help you carry it." His gray eyes held hers. "Whatever darkness she poured into you, you don't have to bear it alone anymore. Let me share the weight." "You can't." Tears blurred her vision. "I'm an empath. I absorb. I don't release." "You've never tried to release with someone who wanted to receive." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "With someone whose soul is bound to yours." It was madness. Everything she knew about her gift said it flowed one direction only, into her, never out. But as she looked into Kaylin's eyes, as she felt the bond between them pulse with something warm and golden, she wondered if perhaps everything she knew was wrong. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted somewhere in the keep. Shouts, running footsteps, the clash of steel. Kaylin was on his feet instantly, moving toward the door. Stay here. Bar the door behind me. He was gone before she could argue. Seraphine stood frozen in the center of her chamber, heart hammering, as the sounds of battle grew closer, then closer still. Then the window exploded inward. Glass rained across the floor as a figure climbed through. A woman in black leather armor, her face twisted with fanatical devotion. "The Queen sends her regards," the assassin hissed, drawing twin silver daggers. "She wants you to know that if she can't have you, no one will." Seraphine backed away, her bare feet crunching on broken glass, her hands raised in futile defense. The assassin lunged, and something inside Seraphine snapped. Power erupted from her palms, not the gentle warmth of healing, but something raw and blinding and furious. Years of absorbed torment, countless swallowed screams, all the Queen's poison, everything exploding outward in a wave of golden light that slammed the assassin against the far wall. The woman crumpled, unconscious or dead. Seraphine couldn't tell. She stood shaking in the aftermath, staring at her own hands. Light still flickered around her fingers, fading slowly like embers dying. What was that? What had she done? The door burst open and Kalen rushed in, sword drawn, blood spattering his bare chest. He took in the scene, the shattered window, the fallen assassin, Seraphine standing amidst the destruction with power bleeding from her hands, and went very still. "Seraphine," he breathed, "your eyes." She caught her reflection in a shard of broken mirror on the floor. Her eyes were glowing gold. Dawn found Seraphine standing before the Council of Elders, her bandaged hands clasped before her, her golden eyes now returned to their normal deep brown. The great hall of Vorith Keep radiated warmth from massive hearths. Tapestries depicted wolves running free beneath starlit skies. And the faces watching her held curiosity rather than cruelty. But she still felt like prey. "Tell us what happened," the eldest counselor said. His name was Aldrich, his white hair and weathered face speaking of centuries lived. She lifted the charcoal pencil and wrote on the parchment they'd provided. The assassin came through the window. Something inside me broke open. Light came from my hands. I don't know how. You claim to be an empath, a receiver. Yet what you describe is projection. Aldrich's ancient eyes narrowed. Those are not the same gift. Perhaps I can offer clarity. A new voice echoed through the hall. Everyone turned as an ancient woman descended the stairs. Her skin was like cracked parchment, her eyes swirling with silver light. She moved with the aid of a gnarled staff, but there was nothing frail about her presence. "Grandmother," Kalen's voice held genuine reverence. "You found your mate, and she carries wounds of flesh and spirit. Did you think I would stay away?" She stopped before Seraphine. "Let me see your hands, child." The grandmother unwrapped them gently, revealing raw skin from the power surge. But beneath the damage, faint lines of gold threaded through her veins like liquid light. "Ah!" The old woman's breath caught. "This child is not merely an empath, she is a vessel, one of the rarest gifts our kind has ever known." "What is a vessel?" Seraphine wrote frantically. "Empaths absorb. They take emotions and hold them. But vessels transform. They take darkness and transmute it into light, pain into power." "Why now?" Kalen demanded. "She's suffered for so long." "Because transformation requires release, and release requires trust." The grandmother's gaze moved between them. She spent her life as a receptacle, never believing she had the right to let go, never having anyone she trusted enough to release it with. The mate bond created a channel. "But the curse," Kalen interrupted. "Lysara said she couldn't speak until she healed her deepest wound." The old woman's expression grew grave. The queen tied the curse to this child's core belief that she exists only to receive, never to give. Until you truly believe you deserve to speak, to matter, the curse will hold. How do I believe something I've never known? By letting those who love you show you the truth. Before anyone could respond, the great doors burst open. A warrior stumbled in, blood streaming from a wound on his temple. My king! Riders approaching from the south. Hundreds of them, flying the obsidian banner. The hall erupted into chaos. She's declared war. Kalen's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Lysera has actually declared war. Not war. The wounded warrior shook his head. A challenge. She's invoking the old law, single combat between alphas for territorial dispute. She claims you stole her property and demands satisfaction. Seraphine's blood turned to ice. Me, she wrote, her hand shaking so badly the letters were barely legible. She means me. I'm the property she's claiming. You are not property. Kalen's growl echoed through the hall. You were never property. The old law doesn't care about sentiment, Aldrich said grimly. If she's invoking single combat, you must answer or forfeit your claim. That's how it's always been. Then I'll answer. Kalen's jaw set with deadly determination. I'll face her and end this. No. Seraphine grabbed his arm, her written words forgotten in her desperation. She shook her head violently, pressing her hand to her heart and then to his. She'll kill you. She's been alpha for centuries. You can't. I won't lose you. He caught her face in his hands, his gray eyes blazing. Not to her. Not to anyone. I've waited my entire life for you, Seraphine. Do you think I'll let her take you back? Then let me fight. The words appeared on the parchment before she'd consciously decided to write them. But as soon as they existed, she knew they were right. She hurt me, used me, stole my voice and my freedom and 3 years of my life. Her hand moved faster, fueled by something that felt like fire. If anyone has the right to face her, it's me. Absolutely not. Kalen's response was immediate. You've barely begun to understand your power. She's had centuries to. The girl has a point. Everyone turned to stare at the grandmother. The old law allows for champions. She continued calmly. If the claimed property wishes to defend their own freedom, they may stand in place of their claimed owner. Her silver eyes found Seraphine's. You are not his property, child, but you are his mate. And as his mate, you have the right to fight for your own liberation. This is insane, Kalen snarled. I won't allow it. You can't stop me. The words hung between them, heavy with challenge. She's right, my king. Aldrich's voice was reluctant but firm. If the lady wishes to invoke her right, not even you can deny her. Kalen stared at Seraphine, his expression a war between terror and something that might have been pride. You could die. I've been dying for 3 years. She held his gaze without flinching. At least this way, I die free, fighting for something that matters. For a long, agonizing moment, no one spoke. Then Kalen exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping in defeat. If this is what you want, I won't stop you. He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. But I'm going to spend every moment until the challenge teaching you how to survive. The 3 days before the challenge were the most grueling of Seraphine's life. Kalen trained her relentlessly, pushing her gift to limits she hadn't known existed. She learned to channel the golden light deliberately, to shape it into shields and weapons. She learned to read an opponent's emotions before they attacked. And she learned what it meant to release. You're still holding back, Kalen said on the second night, circling her in the moonlit training yard. All that darkness the queen poured into you. It's still there. I'm afraid, she signed. What if I let it go, and it destroys everything? What if you don't let it go, and it destroys you? He moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. Heat radiated through his palms. Whatever you release, I'll catch. Whatever darkness you expel, I'll transform. That's what mates do, Seraphine. We carry each other's burdens. She closed her eyes, feeling all those years pressing against her chest. The queen's jealousy, her bitter hatred, all of it. Let it go, she told herself. Let him help. The first wave was black as pitch, boiling from her chest. She felt the bond flare as Kaelin absorbed what she released, transmuting her darkness into light that sparked like stars around them. More followed. Memories of pain, echoes of screams she'd never voiced, years of trauma bleeding from her soul. And Kaelin took it all. By the time she was empty, they were both on their knees, gasping, holding each other. There, he breathed. Do you feel that? She did. For the first time since her captivity began, her chest felt light. Clear. How do you feel? She signed weakly. I feel what she did to you. And I feel more certain than ever that I'm going to watch you destroy her. The morning of the challenge dawned gray and cold. Seraphine stood at her window, watching the obsidian forces gather below. Hundreds of warriors in black armor. And at their center, Queen Lysara in silver and shadow. You don't have to do this. Kaelin stood in her doorway, dressed for battle despite his promise. I know, she signed. I want to. If anything happens to you, then you'll know I died fighting, not suffering in silence. He kissed her, soft, desperate, a promise of everything they might never have. Come back to me. The ceremony was brief. They met on the field between the armies, Seraphine in borrowed armor, Lysara in royal regalia. The queen's amber eyes raked over her former servant with undisguised contempt. So the little empath thinks she can challenge me. Lysara laughed. How delightful. Seraphine didn't respond. Couldn't respond. What's the matter, pet? Cat got your tongue? The queen smiled. Oh, that's right. I do. The signal came. A single horn blast. Lysara attacked without warning, shifting mid-leap into a massive wolf with fur the color of dried blood. Her jaws snapped closed inches from Seraphine's throat. Seraphine dodged, calling on her training. Golden light erupted from her palms, forming a shield that deflected the next attack. You made me what I am, she thought. Let's see how you like it returned. She released a wave of force, slamming Lysara to the ground. The queen shifted to human form, blood streaming from her temple. Impossible, Lysara hissed. You were nothing. Exactly. The word emerged from Seraphine's throat, raw and broken, but unmistakably real. Her first spoken word since the curse. Both armies went silent. You made me a vessel, Seraphine continued, each word easier than the last, but vessels can be emptied. She raised her hands, golden light blazing, but Lysara was centuries old. As Seraphine gathered her power, the queen pulled a vial of shimmering black liquid from her belt and hurled it. The poison struck Seraphine's chest. Pain erupted. Worse than the silver burns, worse than the ritual torture. This was death spreading through her veins like black fire. She heard Kaelin's roar, felt herself falling. The last thing she saw was Lysara's triumphant smile. Seraphine woke in darkness. You're dying. The voice came from everywhere, her own voice from before the curse. The poison is eating you from the inside. You have minutes. Then why am I here? Because dying gives you a choice. You can let go. Accept the end. The darkness shifted, revealing a mirror version of herself, whole, glowing with golden light. Or you can fight, transform. The poison is darkness, pain, death, all things you've absorbed before. The mirror self-pressed a glowing hand to Seraphine's chest. The queen thought she was killing you. She gave you exactly what you needed to become what you were always meant to be. How? Trust your mate. Trust your bond. Trust yourself. Seraphine closed her eyes and reached for the golden thread connecting her to Kaelin. On the battlefield, Kaelin fought like a demon. His wolf form tore through soldiers as he tried to reach Seraphine. But she was too far, and he could feel her fading through the bond. He shifted back, cutting down enemies, and finally broke through. Seraphine lay crumpled on bloodied grass, black veins crawling up her neck. Lysara stood over her, laughing. "Did you really think she could beat me?" Kaelin launched himself at the queen, but her claws caught him across the chest. "I'm going to enjoy this," Lysara purred, advancing. "First I'll kill you, then I'll keep her body as a trophy." Through the dimming bond, Kaelin could barely feel Seraphine. "I'm sorry," he thought. "I couldn't save you." And then the bond exploded with light. Seraphine opened her eyes. The poison was still there, but now it felt different. Not death, transformation. Not an invader, a resource. Trust yourself. She rose. Golden light blazed around her, so bright that warriors on both sides stumbled backward. Lysara spun from where she'd been about to deliver the killing blow to Kaelin. "No," the queen breathed. "The poison should have killed me?" Seraphine's voice rang across the battlefield, clear and strong and finally free. "You spent years teaching me to absorb darkness. Did you never consider what would happen when I learned to transform it?" She raised her hands, and the golden light intensified. All the pain and poison and darkness she'd absorbed transmuted into something pure. "You wanted to make me a weapon," Seraphine continued. "Congratulations. You succeeded." Lysara shifted and lunged. Seraphine caught the attack with blazing hands, holding the wolf suspended in midair. Golden light seared into dark fur, and Lysara howled. "Every burn you gave me, every scar, every ounce of hatred you poured into my soul." Seraphine's voice was eerily calm. "I'm giving it all back." She released. The explosion was visible for miles, a pillar of gold that turned the gray clouds to fire. When it faded, Lysara lay in a scorched circle, human again, broken, but alive. "Death would be too easy," Seraphine said. "You're going to live knowing the pet you broke escaped you. That the vessel you created destroyed everything you built. That the voice you stole spoke the words that ended your reign." Lysara tried to speak, but only a croak emerged. The light had seared something permanent. "How does it feel?" Seraphine asked softly. "To have your voice stolen?" She turned and walked toward Kaelin. He was struggling to his feet, wounds healing, his gray eyes filled with awe. When she reached him, when her lips found his, the mate bond blazed brighter than her transformation. "You're speaking," he breathed. "I had something worth saying." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "I love you. I've loved you since you offered to carry my darkness. I was just too broken to believe I deserved to say it. And now?" She smiled, perhaps the first real smile of her life. "Now I know I'm not broken. I was just waiting to transform." Around them, the Vorith army erupted in cheers. The Obsidian forces retreated. "Marry me," Kaelin said. "You're supposed to ask. Will you marry me?" "Yes. Forever. Yes." 3 months later, the Great Hall had been transformed with flowers from every territory. Representatives from a dozen packs gathered to witness what many called the wedding of the century. And at the center stood Seraphine, no longer servant, no longer vessel, but the Alpha Queen of the Northern Territories. "You look terrified," Mira whispered beside her. The girl had been smuggled from the Obsidian Court 2 weeks ago. "I'm overwhelmed. All these people here for me. Here for you and the ridiculously handsome Wolf King who can't stop staring at you." Seraphine's eyes found Kalen across the hall. When their gazes met, he smiled, that devastating smile that still stole her breath. "I love you," she thought through the bond. "I know. I can feel it. I've always been able to feel it." The ceremony was simple: vows, binding of hands, and then the part that made her pulse race. "Among our people," the grandmother announced, "marriage is sealed with marks, the claiming bite that binds two souls for eternity." Seraphine tilted her head, baring her throat. "Are you sure?" Kalen's voice was rough. "Once done, it can't be undone. I spent years learning what it meant to be claimed by someone who wanted to destroy me. Now I want to know what it feels like to be claimed by someone who wants to cherish me." He kissed her first, soft, reverent. Then his lips trailed down to the junction of her neck and shoulder. When his teeth pierced her skin, Seraphine gasped. Not from pain. From connection, completion, the overwhelming sensation of two souls becoming one. She felt him flood into her, his love, his devotion, his fierce protective joy. And she poured herself back. The mate bond exploded into something unbreakable. "My mate," he breathed. "My heart, my queen." But Seraphine wasn't finished. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his throat. "This isn't tradition," he managed. "I know. But I want to mark you too. I want everyone to know you're mine as much as I'm yours." Her bite was gentler. She didn't have wolf teeth. But enough. The bond surged as her mark joined his, two claims intertwined. "My mate," she said. "My heart. My king." The hall erupted in cheers. Later, alone in their chambers, Kalen traced the mark on her throat. "I never imagined this," he admitted. "All those years searching, I never imagined finding someone who made me feel so complete." "Neither did I." Seraphine pressed his hand to her heart. "I thought I was going to die in that castle, voiceless, empty, alone. And now?" She smiled through tears of joy. "Now I'm home." Through the window, wolves howled their blessing to the moon. And in the Northern Territories, a new legend was born. Of the silent servant who became a queen, the darkness that transformed into light, and the love that proved stronger than any curse. They would face other challenges. Lysera's allies would seek revenge. Enemies would test them. The world would remain dangerous. But they would face it together. Bound by choice, sealed by scars, united by a love worth every moment of waiting. Forever. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you'd like to listen on the go, all my stories are also available on Spotify under your channel name. You'll find the link in the description below. A big thank you to everyone who's subscribed. Your support truly means the world to me.